I'm joined here by Brian Redcheck. He's our VP of Product. I'm the marketing guy, but don't worry, I won't be talking for too long. He'll be doing most of the heavy lifting, and he'll be talking about some of the concepts that we kind of take as our Clover DX philosophy and kind of our approach to that problem. And he'll be showing also tiny demos that kind of demonstrate that. So I'll use him to flip the slides because he'll be showing the product later. So we'll do the high tech thing. And Brian, can we please go to the next slide? So the first thing I wanted to start with is essentially talking about the reality of life and some of the things that we need to kind of overcome to get to innovation, to get to some improvements in our lives and our team's lives. I like to call them choke points, which are essentially some moments in life or some things that kind of hinder the progress. And one of the tasks that we quite often see is there's still a lot of manual work that teams are doing and that can be automated or somehow eliminated. So that typically is our number one goal. Then the other thing that we are seeing quite often is some external dependencies that slow down progress. It might be some other team, it might be the IT team, it might be some overloaded person, but everything essentially means there's downtimes, there's waiting, there's long project cycles that we have to deal with. The other side of that equation is the technical challenge. Quite often, if you're trying to support your team, that means you have to work with other teams, other departments, and they potentially have different technologies that you have to somehow pull together. So that's another thing that we are helping with quite often. The other thing that's kind of a soft side of things is there might be some emotion yourself or within the team, which comes from previously failed attempts to improve something or to fix something. And there might be some bitterness towards trying or towards adopting certain approaches. So that's something to overcome as well. And one of the things that I heard from one of our customers was a very simple thing. We rather did something, it's not the perfect thing, but if we wanted to do the perfect thing, that would have never happened. And that resonated with me. I quite like that kind of fatalism in that where it's much better to do something and then wait for the perfect thing to happen. So that brings us to Rene. What I call the Business System Analysts checkmate, which is essentially the being locked among multiple different forces that each one makes your lives slightly more difficult than they should be. One is the kind of need to provide access and governance over data that you don't own. You don't own the IT systems that the data are in. You need to provide access to that. It needs to be fixed very quickly. And it's a very visible problem, but the fix needs to be invisible and meaning mostly like low on budget and kind of easy to implement. So that brings us to Bruno, to essentially what we are going to talk about today, but let's say a certain take on that is data democratization. How can we embrace the process of making data accessible to more people and enable those people to be self-sufficient so that they can work with the data themselves and kind of avoid the manual work, the inefficiencies coming from that, and also the downtimes from the dependencies that quite often hinder process. And for us, data democratization doesn't mean that essentially people just get access to data. That's not enough. A little bit of explanation of data democratization. Essentially, what you own is easy. What others own is more difficult to get to. But in order to get some value from data in general, like the organization's data, more and more people need access to more and more data sets. So essentially what we are going to be talking about is making it even more easy to access your data, but also add others' data in some, let's say, standardized way. So you have a couple options. Essentially, number one option would be to do the perfect thing, build or augment if you already have some data architecture that potentially is in your team or your department, but more often it needs to be across the entire organization. Or you kind of give up on the idea and you say, like, well, give access to everyone. Brian, let's not do that just yet.
I'm sorry.
You provide access to the raw data, be it the applications themselves, or be it, for example, some data lake or lakehouse where you consolidate all the data and you kind of leave it to the user to make some sense of it and be efficient with that. Or a third option, which is you embrace the situation as is. You're not trying to change it too much, but you can provide some sort of what we would call federation layer, which provides access to what's already in place without too much hassle. And each one of these options has different kind of caveats. So the first one, obviously, it's too big of a project. It's never done. You never can get to the perfect thing, and it needs to be perfect in order to work as intended. And there's a lot of dependencies on others. And we've seen this quite a lot of times where there are attempts to do this, but they cause more of that frustration than the actual benefit that people can derive from it.
And
Or you take,
maybe to add a little bit to that, and the worst thing that can happen to you here is that you finish halfway, right? So
yeah,
come up with an architecture for something, you finish the halfway, and 2 years down the line, you start another project, so you have another halfway finished. And instead of having one large architecture that covers everything, you have these little pieces that still are disconnected. They serve different parts of the organization. It's better for them than it was before, but it's still not a complete thing. So there's still, you have bigger silos, right? So not too many of them. They are bigger, but the issue still remains.
yeah, and it kind of brings you back to square one, and you're
Yes.
on this list of options again. So the next one is kind of provide access to everything to everyone. The downside of that is there's a lot of challenges around governing that kind of process. There will be privacy issues, but also skill set among the people. A lot of raw data access, be it the applications themselves or the storage, like data warehouse or like require different skill sets. So that can be quite taxing on the audience. And the final option is kind of embracing the situation as is. Uh, it's not the best option either. There's quite a few downsides to it as well. If you want to do it again right, it might turn out to be too big of a project and quite a bit of complication. But what we want to show you today is that with like proper tooling and proper approach, you can simplify it to a point where this third option is the easiest one to actually get done and get results from without kind of having too many problems that come out of that. So we'll be talking about the third option as, I don't want to say the least evil one. We've seen quite good implementations which solve the problem and don't complicate things. But there's a caveat where it needs to be balanced between like doing it right, but not doing the perfect thing. So we're from CloverDX. We're a data integration platform. We provide the product as well as services that help kind of implement it. And the idea that we want to talk about today is essentially how we can join up the technical teams, be it the IT team themselves or some local department IT or yourselves. How it can be combined with giving some tools to business users that they can work with data themselves, but not in isolation. And the idea is that the business users work with data themselves with data that's been provided to them through the platform, through that blue box called data catalog, and you'll see what it means. But the takeaway from this is we're a data integration platform that kind of helps both sides of the equation and helps them collaborate together. And we'll see on the next slide what it looks like in this kind of simplifying or making data accessible to business users more easily. So this looks quite complicated as a diagram, but it's not. I'll walk you through it. essentially the idea is quite simple. On the left, the gray area is everything that's in your organization or even outside. That's all the like different systems and data warehouses, data lakes, whatever people have built over time. And that's essentially outside your control. If you do have control over it, good for you, good for you. That's great. But not everything would be under your control, and you kind of have to embrace what it is. That's kind of the embracing the reality part of the thing. But what we want to show you is with certain tooling, if you have capabilities that are on the technical side as well as on the simpler business user side, you can essentially sort of grasp control over the whole process. So going from left to right, you can connect to the data wherever it is. And then on the technical side, you can have transformation, automation, and orchestration capabilities that help you somehow get from the raw data, which is potentially incomprehensible and difficult to work with, you can get it to a point where the data is in a form that's shareable and usable by the end user. And then you can take that and put it into what we call a data catalog, which holds curated, high quality, kind of validated data that's shared with business users. And then they can access that data catalog and the data in it through a self-service data preparation interface. It's part of the platform. It doesn't replace their tools. It just augments the way how they work with those tools and how they can be more proficient or efficient with what they do. And since it's under a single platform, you have the green part, which is the technical part, as well as the blue part under your control. And this is the process essentially of taking raw data, turning it into something usable, and then giving the business user the tools to run with it themselves. And what Branyo will be showing from now on is both like what it looks like on the green on the IT side or the technical side, as well as what it looks like on the blue business user side. So with that, I'll hand it over to Branyo, and I might jump in if I have some more ideas. But yeah, let's get to the more practical side of a part of the show.
Yeah, thank you, Pavel. And again, thank you everyone for joining us on the webinar. So I'll start kind of in the middle, and we have the data catalog as sort of a central piece, right? It's the place where you publish your data and where the business users can consume it. And when you think about data catalog and on kind of an abstract level, it's a place where you should be able to find all your data. And in our version of the data catalog, what you get is basically the ability to publish what we call trusted data sets. So you use the Clover DX platform as a place where you grab data from whatever the source is, right? The large gray area on the left side on the previous slide, and you manage it in some way. You, for example, turn it into something that's a bit more understandable by your users by, for example, combining multiple data sets, enriching it in some way, and you publish that within the data catalog. Right? It is a simple interface that I'll show you what it looks like, that they can access all the data. So you control what they can see, and there's of course full permission systems behind that, and they get access to the data in a format that makes sense. They essentially avoid what we typically call data prep hell, because oftentimes working with data is 10% the interesting bit where you actually are getting some value out of your data, and 90% is just either getting to the data in the first place or just making sure that you can even do something with it, like, I don't know, reading some files that are in half-broken format or something like that. And this whole process is very straightforward. You simply click on it and you can start using your data. And let's have a quick look at the product. I'll show you what's actually behind the catalog. Right? On your end, as the business system analysts, you are the people who manage the catalog. So you are responsible for what is visible in the catalog, who gets to see that, and what they can use. So the first product that I'll start with is the Designer. And this is the environment in Clover DX in which you build all your data transformations. And since everything within Clover runs on the same platform, this is also the place where you build the connectors for your data catalog. And they are built using the same languages you use for building the transformation. So they are very visual. For example, this is a data catalog connector that provides access to contacts from an online store. And you can see there are different boxes that accomplish different functions. And this allows you to connect to everything, right? Clover DX allows you to connect with different data sources. This is a different catalog entry that provides access to employees. It just goes to a database, right? So this one is very simple. And you have the ability to work with all kinds of data sources or even targets if you need to write the data somewhere and so on. And this is something that allows your team to build even complex data sources or data targets, because the product allows you to work with version control, share your work with others, and so on. And once you have this ready, you can export that and configure it within Clover DX server, which looks like this. Right? So this is one of the interfaces that allows you to essentially deploy your connectors to the data catalog, so they then appear in the Wrangler. This is the business interface. And this might seem complicated because there are like 3 pieces of the puzzle, but it's actually very simple from the user's point of view. This is the interface that they get, right? They can see the catalog, they can click on they can click on things to see what's inside, use it in a very simple way, which I'll show you in a couple of moments. So they can see how to work with data, and there's always a very simple way of progressing to the next step. On your end, as the business system analysts, you have far more tools at your disposal. You can build data sources in any way you want, whether they are simple or complex. You have tools that allow you to manage who gets to see that. Like, for example, if you look at the Salesforce, I get the full access to configuration that allows me to control which groups of users can see the data in their data catalog. But all this complexity is hidden from your users, right? On your end, this is fine. It's not that hard to manage, but there's still a single platform powering the whole thing. So let's go back to slides and let's look at the next thing. So to kind of recap, right? What you build in the designer allows you to connect with any source. You can add complex behaviors to your data catalog entry, so they don't have to be just like raw entities, for example, tables from whatever system you connect to, but they can be more complicated. And this is all running on a platform called Clover DX that can be used for all kinds of things. So this is not just like one purpose data access platform, but rather it's a complete platform that allows you to implement all kinds of use cases. Very common ones are listed on the slide, like, for example, data ingestion or data onboarding is something where Clover is very good at, because we can connect to all kinds of data sources, transform them in any way that you need to get your data into some sort of internal platform, and all of that can be very easily automated and managed from like a single place. All of these use cases have something in common, that always they rely on automation. This is the strong part of Clover DX, where you can automate processes, whether you are reading the data, that can be automated, the processing of the data, and also the output to target systems. The deployment is also simple. You can do cloud, on-premise, or even hybrid deployment models. So all of that allows you to deploy Clover in any manner that you need to. Regardless of your use case, there will be something in Clover that helps. So this is the whole platform that powers the data catalog, the Wrangler, which is the business interface. And let's have a look at that part, because this is what your users will be doing in the end, right? So you publish some data for them in the data catalog. They can find it, they can work with it very easily. And they have a different interface for building something that works with their data. This is the Wrangler. It's a self-service data transformation platform, so that they can, in very simple and interactive way, build their transformations. They don't need to code, so there's no learning programming languages or anything like that. They are not learning anything from the designer either, right? So they don't need to understand how the colorful boxes that I've shown you before, the components and all of that, how that works. They simply have an interface that's familiar to them, that looks like an Excel, that they can work with it. And so let's have a look at the platform again. I'll show you how you can grab something from a data catalog and how you can work with it, apply some sort of transformation to it, map it to the target, and so on. So let's go here. And you can see that I'm using browser to access this. So this is something that doesn't require any installation from from those users. They simply go to an address that you give them, log in with their username, which can be connected to company-wide Active Directory or similar platform. So you can even do single sign-on. So very easy to access and work with. And if you look at something, it's very simple to work with data. Like for example, if I look at the product data in here, I can see what's inside it, and I can, just clicking a button, I can do something with my data. Right? So let's create a job. And from this interface, I can build my transformations in an interactive way. It's essentially recording the steps that I'm doing, applying them on my data, and allowing me to repeat the transformation whenever I need to do something. So let me actually show you a job that's finished. For example, this one. And so this is a job that takes order payments, reformats them in certain way, applies transformation like lookup or conversion from one data type to another. And all these steps is something that I can work with in an interactive fashion. At every point in the transformation, I can click on it and see what the data looks like. Right? It allows me to see exactly what's happening with my data, and I can add new steps very easily. For example, I can add something like this. What do we do? Like uppercase, right? That's simple transformation that it will be immediately visible. So very easy for business users to build something and then even to send it to others, right? They can have the ability to write to any location that you have published for them through data catalog. And the best part is that, as I mentioned, Clover is very heavy on automation. So you can run your job at any time and it will process the data that's available to it. So for example, if it connects with your CRM system, it doesn't store the data in a file, it just goes to your CRM, grabs the latest version of the data and goes with that, right? The transformation runs with that. So you always get access to the fresh data depending on what's published in the catalog. And a huge part of working with data like this is the ability to validate your data as it is processed. So this is built into Wrangler as well. Whenever you run something, you get a summary like this, which tells you what kind of issues were found during processing. For example, in here, I can see that I have data in my data set where the order ID is supposed to be an integer, but it's not. And I have 21 records like that out of almost 8,000. And so this is kind of summary allows me to see what's wrong with my data. And then I can, of course, go and correct that either by going into the source system or modifying my transformation to deal with that in some way. For example, by choosing a default value or rejecting the record and so on. So this is a complete solution for the business user or domain expert who can take the data that you published for them, right? A nice, clean, and understandable data set, apply transformation and produce the data that either they consume, for example, in a file, or that goes to a downstream system. Okay, let's continue here. So we've seen how you can take data in Wrangler, apply transformations to it. And when you think about what Wrangler brings to you on the business system analyst side, there are a few things. Obviously, you can use it too, right? So it can help you to work with data. But the biggest change is that it will increase the productivity for business users. They no longer have to hunt for their data. They can easily rerun it as many times as they want. It's a single click to run a job again. So that report that you spend hours every week to create, you do it once. And then every week you just click a button, wait for a couple of seconds for the thing to finish. And that's it, right? So the automation allows them to do the repetitive steps that they have and do them very easily with just a couple of clicks or a single click even, and save a lot of time. It will also eliminate a lot of ad hoc data requests. A very common request from business side is to the IT to ask for data. Like, can you please export this data set from whatever system because I need it for a report or I need to do something with it. I need to verify something. If the tools that they are using don't have that, like for example, if you go to a CRM, it might have an export function that gives you what you need, but in many cases it doesn't because you, for example, need wider range of query parameters or something like that. So you go and they ask you, right? Because you have access to that system. So Wrangler allows you to publish data in a form that those business users can use directly without using this kind of ad hoc data requests and essentially just creating work for others. And obviously, once you have the data in a good format that's easy to use, easy to understand for people who need to work with it, it allows you to drive higher quality outcomes because your input is better than just giving you raw data that you then spend days just formatting so that it's useful. It's validated, it's clean, it's easy to access. So what you produce can be much higher quality than what you can get from raw data just by, by having the data validated every step of the process and so on. So this is something that Wrangler can allow as well. So you can trust the output of it more than just some Excel macro or something similar that you might need to redo every time that you try to run the process again. And of course, this is just the first part of Wrangler, right? Getting the data into the platform, transforming it in some way, but there's more to it. The whole platform, the Clover DX, allows you to write data to whatever target you might have. And the same thing you can do in Wrangler. You can publish, besides just data sources, you can also publish data targets within the Wrangler data catalog. And these data targets allow you to write the data from those business users to any destination that you might need. And just as with the sources where you can add additional behavior to the source, not just like publish raw data table, you can add additional behaviors to data targets. So the targets can validate your data, add additional data to it as some sort of enrichment or anything that you can create in the platform. And so let's have a look at that. And the best part is that this is done in exactly the same way. Like for example, when you look at the back end of it, this is the data target. When you just look at it quickly and you squint a little bit, it's exactly the same thing as a source. The only difference is that there's an end to it, right? So it writes somewhere, in my case, to Snowflake, whereas for the sources, there's a beginning to it that there's essentially no end, right? So one reads the data, the other one produces, writes the data somewhere. And it's done in the same way in the data catalog. So I can see my targets. For example, when I click just to see the targets, I have a number of targets in my catalog that allow me to write my data somewhere. The one that we've seen a minute ago is this one, or the payment target, which requires this. And I need to produce data in this format where I provide payment ID, order ID, and so on. And this is something that I can do in Wrangler. As a business user, right? Kind of switching my hats now, let's now provide data to someone. So this is the job that I've shown even before. It grabs the order payment information and needs to map it to the format that the target requires. This is done at the end in a very simple way. Where you edit the mapping simply by drag and drop in this way. Well, I mapped it incorrectly now, but it's not a valid mapping. But again, it's very visual and simple to work with it. It gives you immediate feedback if something's wrong. Like for example, I mapped type, which is a number, to something that's supposed to be text. Right? This is the column that I need. It's a different type column from my data set. So this is something that I can do. And as a business user, I can create this kind of mapping, even run it, play with it if I need to, but I can also provide it to the Business Systems Analyst for integration into something bigger, right? There's an export button in here. When I go to my jobs, I can export it, and you can import it back to the designer, and you get to do something like this. When you look at this, again, it looks the same, but it's not. This is an automation layer in Clover called Job Flow. And this allows me, this one, what it implements is basically looking at all the input files in certain location and then finding a way of processing them. And the processing of each file is driven in Wrangler. This is what you have. This is, let's wait for it to open. This is another job, and this middle part is something that was created by the business user in Wrangler. So they exported their mapping in this case that maps orders to the order payments. And then I loaded into Snowflake in here, but I can do anything in here. The bottom part allows me to collect errors, which are written into different table in Snowflake so that I can review them later. You might have a front end that accesses that, or just a notification email, whatever you need that can be implemented in Clover. The interesting bit in here is that as a business system analyst, you don't have to ask your business users to write you a specification for how the orders are mapped from whatever your customers, for example, give you to your internal layout. You just ask them to build it in Wrangler. They do it in the means that they can understand, that they are very simple. They export that, give it to you, and you can automate that in a very simple manner through the whole platform. You can run it on a schedule, or even, for example, trigger by Kafka messages. Basically, anything is possible when you integrate your jobs in this way. And since everything runs on the same platform, you get to see full history of everything, right? All your jobs are visible in here so that you can track their history and see whether they've been running properly. You can easily investigate issues if they happen and so on. So coming back to this one, you essentially have a complete end-to-end platform that allows you to, on one hand, give something to your business users so that they can work with data in very intuitive and easy manner. But what they produce doesn't have to be siloed and just accessible to them. You can actually connect those two parts of the platform together. They can work in the interface they are familiar with, export their job, and you can integrate it into something bigger that takes care of difficult things, like the whole orchestration of the process of taking data from somewhere and loading it somewhere else can be quite complicated in many cases. And they don't need to understand it. They just understand their data, how it works, what's supposed to happen with it, and you take care of the automation around that. Both parties kind of work together and collaborate very easily within one platform, so that you don't have to, provide specifications as crazy long Word documents or Excel tables. And that's it from my side, Pavel.
Yeah, so this is everything that we have for you today. We wanted to give you some basic overview as well as more practical insight into what it can look like in practice. It might look complicated, it might look easy depending on your previous experience, but we're trying to combine essentially the complexity and the power to solve complexity when it's needed with simplicity of use for the right users. So at the end, I have a few thoughts for you, maybe to take away from this is thinking about these three questions. Are there any processes that you or your teams are working on that can potentially benefit from some automation? And that could be kind of the first line of attack to address some of the choke points that I mentioned earlier or at the beginning. The other thing is about the sharing and about data catalog. The idea that we have is data that's been that is used as a basis for a bunch of data exports or kind of are present in quite a few requests could be shared as a source or potentially target in the data catalog so that we eliminate some of the ad hoc requests and we enable people to work with the data themselves. And the last one is more emotional about what was the kind of challenge, what were the challenges that you faced the last time you were trying to improve something, and potentially what could kind of unblock those challenges for the next time that you try. And think about it. You can think about it here out loud when we open the Q&A session, or you can think about it and then maybe get back to us if you have any further questions or you want some clarification or more insights into how we potentially do